Hello and welcome, I'm JD, and today I want to go through some of the line ships for the OSP because we had a bit of a release last week from the development team showing the temporary blockouts of the models used for the modular nature of this ship type. And so I also want to put a bit of a disclaimer up front, and this is something that the devs also mentioned in their post. So this is still work in progress, even though there are layouts and socket counts. So the sockets are all the things we'll come on to in a second. They're not final. It still needs to go through the internal development process, and then it'll need to go through a testing phase as well. And so whatever you see on screen during this video is likely to change and is subject to change. So I just don't want to overhype this, just simply bring you a bit of information that you may have not seen if you're not in the Discord. So we'll come on to a detailed look of the video playing in the background at the moment. So just to refresh you, the Outlying Systems Protectorate is the second faction within Nebulous Fleet Command, and they will oppose the Alliance, who are the current in-game faction. They have 3 classes of ships, and the models that you're seeing in the background are the early versions of the line ships. And now the line ships of the OSP are the mainstay ships of the fleet. They are converted freighters, tankers, basically large cargo vessels that have been quickly retrofitted to be pressed into war. Now, one of the things that make them unique is the fact that they have a modular nature. So each will have a bow, a midsection, and a rear, which will be automatically rolled when you add a hull to your fleet. Now, one of the challenges that the developers have here is making sure that even though the visual aesthetics changes, that they largely operate and play the same way. And so they'll all have a rough layout of sockets, therefore the same amount of capabilities. Although a few minor differences, so that you do get that feeling of ships that are unique within your fleet. But an important piece of information that we get with the release of this short video is that the segments of the ship will each share a key so that the ships can be directly cloned into new randomized layouts while keeping the same setup. And so whilst they'll be able to roughly share the same amount of sockets, you should be able to copy from one to the other and therefore not having to rebuild your ship each time. So I think that's pretty cool. All right, so let's actually have a look at the video in detail. So the first thing I want to bring to your attention is what all the different colors mean on the screen. So it can be a little bit overwhelming to look at with all the different lines and different colors. So all the mounts are in the light pink color. Now, mounts are things such as your weapons, they are electronic warfare, point defense, etc. The compartments are highlighted in yellow, and these include everything from your command and control components, such as your CICs. They also have all your damage control, your gun plotting centers, and your magazines. And then in light blue is your modules. Now, modules are generally the things that buff your ships. So you've got your mount gyros, you've got your amplified radar receivers to buff your antennas. You also have your actual radars, as well as a few other things in there. And then finally, you have engines and thrusters, and they're highlighted in red. So you'll see quite a few of them. At the end are your main engines, and then you can see dotted around either in the red or sort of that slightly orange color is your actual frontal thrusters and your lateral thrusters as well. And so on to actually having a little bit of a breakdown or a bit of a look at each of the line ships. Now, this is just 3 of the configurations. There are 3 variations of the bow, the mid, and the rear. So I think that's a total of 27 off the top of my head. Could be wrong in that maths. And you'll see on the right-hand side, on the original video, I've actually flipped the damage control board around. So the developers say that is one of the hardest things to make order to sync up with the model. And so that way, the bow of the ship is facing left, as is the models on the ship. So you'll now be able to see what is on the left side of the model is also on the left side of the damage control board, just for a bit of ease of viewing. So let's have a look. Now, if I just quickly direct your attention to the right-hand side, I've actually shown where the lines are for the bow, the mid, and the rear. And I've just made that a little bit more noticeable by using a white line. You can see how the bow, the mid, and the rear each have different sizes, but have a rough configurable layout. So if we have a look at the mounts first, there are quite a few different mounts on the line ships. There are 7 Class 1 mounts, being the 2x2x2 size. And by the looks of it, you have 2 in the bow, 3 in the midsection, and 2 in the rear. And these will be able to house all your point defense, electronic warfare, and your vertical launch systems of the size 1 capacity. And so the way that looks like is most of them are either top or the bottom of the ship. And then around the midships area, you've also got 2 that are angled outwards, as well as on the furthest ship away, you'll then also have 1 mount, which is canted forward. So noting that the blocky nature of these ships, the angles look like they could be actually pretty good for defending against from all the different angles of attack that a missile may approach from. If you have things such as a light cruiser, for example, or even sometimes on the battleship, you don't actually have the mounts pointing in the appropriate directions, and it does limit the arcs based on the angular nature of those hulls. Now, one thing you do need to remember with these mounts is that you're also going to have the point defense turret, for example, just a little bit higher than where you actually see the purple boxes. So that angle and the elevation, which most elevations go up to about 89 degrees, so they can go pretty far, and they usually have a depression of about -5. So you've got quite a good range of motion there by the looks of it, and you've even got some good spots for your chaff placement as well. And then we've also got, from what I can see, 8 size 3 3x4x5 mounts. Now, if I just direct your attention back to a light cruiser, which I have been using to sort of gauge the size of each of these mounts, is that this here on mount 3 is a 3x4x5. But notice how that the top of it here is actually facing the battlefield. Now, if we come back to the line ships, this looks like a 3x4x5 as well, but each of these mounts are actually built into the side. It may look like a broadside weapon options, may be a thing for the line ships of the OSP. Now, there are 8 of these. So you got 2 on each side in the midships and in the bow. So you got 4 in the bow, 4 at midships, nothing in the rear, and they look like, if you were able to run maybe even 2 or 3 of these together, they're going to be quite dangerous in terms of the fact that they can mutually support each other with their point defense options. And then when you're bringing quite a few of these broadsides to bear, it could do a fair amount of damage. Now, one thing that'll need to be overcome is just making sure that when the ships are aligning to target, that they potentially have a bit of a gimbal in terms of being able to roughly align to target, but not be so required, such as a beam or a rail, that they're not actually able to come onto target, or they spend so much time rotating that you're not getting a maximum fire rate that you would expect from the Alliance type of weapons. Now, that's speculation. We obviously don't know what type of weapons that the OSP will have. We know that they'll get a different set of weapons and equipment. It's not directly a one-to-one comparable comparison between the OSP and the Alliance, but we'll just have to wait and see. Now, if we come on to compartments, it looks like there are about 6. They all look to be around the 6x1x4 size, noting that it is a square. So again, if we come back to the light cruiser, you can see here on compartment 6, that is a 6x1x4, and that square nature looks to be about the exact same as the yellow compartments within the line ships. This will give a full range of magazines, gun plotting centers, command options, as well as all your damage control variations. However, you won't be able to take anything like an intel center or a strike center. But again, remembering that all the Alliance equipment will not necessarily come across to the OSP, so this may actually be more than sufficient depending on what the developers have in store for us. Now, it looks like there are 2 in the bow and then 4 in the midships. The ones around the midships do seem to be fairly close together, so potentially dangerous, but also depending on the armor of these types of ships, it may actually be okay. Which brings up one thing, is that even though they are quite long, which is generally what you actually want in order to bow tank with the Alliance, so having the most amount of armor and space between the vital components of your ship and then the weapon systems of the enemy ship that is firing at you, we actually may see that you may want that bow tanking may not be a viable option with the OSP because their broadside cannons, or by what I think is a broadside type weapon module, is actually not going to be the best option. However, it does mean that over penetration will become a thing very quickly, as the larger caliber weapons will simply punch through, dealing less damage as it has less armor to travel through, and then internal distance before it reaches the other side. Finally, if we come on to the modules, so modules being everything that buffs your ship, it looks like we have 2 2x2x2s in the bow, and then 2 2x2x2s in the midship. So all your things like your radars, your reinforced thruster nozzles, all your sensors, and then all your weapon support modifiers should be able to go in there, no issues at all. The 4 is a respectable amount. It's exactly the same amount as a light cruiser at this point in time. Again, remembering that this is not necessarily always a one-to-one comparison. And then it looks like a 1 3x3x3 in the rear, which micro reactor size component, and then I think, a 6x6x6, which is also a reactor size. Now, one thing that usually the Alliance ships have is then an actual engine compartment for their main engines. I can't see that. So again, if we come back to the light cruiser here, whilst your 6x6x6 is here, and then you've got your 3x3x3 for your micro, you've also then generally got a larger module, which is purposely designed for the engines. And so now I can't necessarily see that within these ships. It just appears to be that larger 6x6x6. But again, OSP may operate differently. Maybe these ships are more powerful in moving space freight around, that they'll actually just combine the engine with their main power, or maybe even the smaller one will be the power module. However, it may actually have the ability to be, maybe it outputs more power than a current warship. Not 100% sure how that'll work. Obviously, this is early days, and there may be a lore option potentially within this. But yeah, you can see here that there doesn't look like the engine compartment. Now, so I'll just leave you on this last visual image that I've pulled from the development video. You can see how the modules have been broken down into the bow, the midships, and the rear. Do apologize for the quality. I have taken a screenshot from the video and then blown this up significantly so that you can sort of see it. However, you do see the colors are potentially a little bit better here. And you can see that the way the combinations can actually go together. Now, if you do have a look at the bottom of the screen, that does look like the Oslo class cruiser for the OSP. I could probably try to make some assumptions from that. It is quite blurry, and so I'll just leave that one alone for the time being. Now, like I've been saying, this has been a thing that the development team has been working on. It is still subject to change and then still subject to testing by the testers. I don't know if they'll go out and make a call for testers like they did with the modular missile update or how that will necessarily work. But still, you can see that the second faction is coming along. It's coming along very nicely. It's going to have a completely different playstyle. I think everyone will really enjoy it once it actually comes out. And like always, if I have any other news or anything like that, I will bring it to you so that you stay informed. And so I hope you've enjoyed this video, and that's it from me. So thanks for watching and take care.